Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining me on this edition of the Light the W podcast. It is your favorite Seattle Mariners podcast where we cover all things Mariners baseball. If this is your first time joining us on the show or you're a returner, make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already on YouTube, or you can find us at Light the W, a Seattle Mariners podcast. Or if you want to listen to the audio version, go to Spotify or your preferred podcast platform, where I would love it if you could leave a 5-star review and follow on those platforms. It supports the show and the channel greatly, and it's greatly appreciated. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at LightTheWPod. And finally, without further ado, let's get into today's episode.
The pitch from Acevedo.
Swung on the line, down the left field line for a base hit. Fly ball, gap, right center field. And
Double him up at second.
Luke is going back to the 1-8 track. Get out the right, run and Buster grandma. It is grand salami time.
Polanco sends it into right and will send Seattle to the American League Championship Series for the first time in 24 years.
What is up, everybody? It's a new week. It was a good weekend. Mariners didn't do anything, but what a weekend for the Seattle Seahawks. What a game Saturday night. And the market has been moving around baseball. We've seen quite a few guys go off the board, including two of the top bats. Well, three of the top bats, actually. Bo Bichette, Kyle Tucker, and Alex Bregman all off the board now. At least Cody Bellinger is the best bat available on the free agent market. Mariners aren't expected to be involved there, nor really on the free agent market as a whole for the rest of this offseason. All that said, the Mariners still need moves. They still need a reliever. They still need a bat, if not two bats, in my opinion. And today we're going to be talking about relievers. Time of recording, 5:50, Monday, January 19th. This will release Tuesday morning. So, we're talking relievers. I have got, 4 guys to talk about. 2 guys that I think are a little bit of long shots, and 2 guys that have 1-year control that I think might be possible to trade for. All these guys, high leverage types. The 2 longer control guys, more similar to Jose A. Ferrer, where they could be closer types in the future. The other 2 guys, a little bit lesser quality, but still really, really talented. It's 4 right-handed relievers, half controllable, half rentals. Talked about Jojo Romero last week. He was going to be in this episode. We talked about him early, but we'll touch on him really quickly right at the start, just in case you missed it. And if you did miss it, full breakdown on last week's episode. What was that? Episode 111. So, like I said, episode 112 gets underway now. Okay. So, as we mentioned in the open, guys going off the board: Kyle Tucker, Nolan Arenado, Alex Bregman, JT Realmuto. Kyle Tucker. Did I say Bo Bichette? Bo Bichette. All off the board. Now, it's a lot of free agent bats so far that have gone off the board. And the Mariners have a need for 1 and very likely 2 bats to add to their lineup. We talked about a lot of questions surrounding their current lineup structure. But I think there are also some questions surrounding their current bullpen. Andres Munoz will be the closer. This is the looks of the bullpen right now. Matt Brash, Jose Ferrer, Edward Brizardo, Gabe Spire. Those are the next, 4 guys after Munoz. Likely Brash will be 8th inning guy as much as possible. Spire right behind him, and then Ferrer and Bizardo after that. That's 3 righties, 2 lefties. Bizardo had a breakout year last year. He's 30 years old. And you'll hope he can put together another good season. Currently, the Mariners have 3 spots, though, in their bullpen that are up for a fighting spot. We talked about the pile. Those 3 spots are up to the pile right now. As it stands right now, Carlos Vargas very likely would get one of those spots, but Mariners brought in another guy last week, Josver Zulueta, hard-throwing sinker baller with a couple nice off-speed pitches. But he's going to be added to the pile. Hasn't gotten the results yet at the major league level. Can the Mariners unlock him? Possibly. But if I'm the Mariners and I want to win the American League West in back-to-back years for the first time in franchise history, I don't want to bet on the pile breaking out a guy or two in the bullpen. I want to bring in one more guy so I feel really good about the first 6 guys in my bullpen. Then if we get another guy, that's 7 guys in the bullpen you can trust. I also want to protect against injury as much as possible and regression, because naturally there will be a regression and very likely there'll be injury, especially in a World Baseball Classic year where you have Andres Munoz, Matt Brash, Gabe Spire all throwing in the WBC. So how can you protect against that? You bring in another high leverage reliever. Last week, we talked about Seranthony Dominguez, a free agent reliever that would cost somewhere in the $8 to $10 million range on a 1 or 2 year deal. But I don't know if the Mariners really would be interested in paying that much for a reliever. So we're going to look at more affordable options in terms of payroll. I have 4 guys we're going to look at today, 2 of which are going to be very difficult to trade for. And if you do, they will be very, very expensive because they're very, very controllable and also been very good. Those 2 guys, one from the St. Louis Cardinals, one from the Cincinnati Reds. One of them is a former Mariner. The other 2 guys have 1 singular year of control, and it'll be a little bit easier to acquire. All 4 of these guys are right-handed relievers. The 2 controllable guys have the high leverage upside, the closer upside, in my opinion, while the other 2 guys are nice setup men or bridge guys and would slot in as your 3rd best right-handed reliever, very likely. And if Bizzardo continues what he did last year, your 4th best right-handed reliever. We have one with a really nice, unique arm slot from the Arizona Diamondbacks, and one that I talked about actually last year at the deadline from the Pittsburgh Pirates that was really, really good last year in 70 1/3 innings. Let's start with the controllable guys, though, and let's start with the guy I think that is least likely to be able to be acquired, and that is Connor Phillips. Phillips was traded from the Mariners to the Reds in the original Eugenio Suarez trade that sent Eugenio Suarez and Jesse Winker to Seattle. 24 years old now, debuted just last year. Phillips will be a really good reliever if he sticks there. Transitioned to the pen for the first time last year, and he had been a starter all the way through the minors up through that time. He has a 3-pitch mix and was really good in limited opportunity last year, throwing just 25 innings. That said, the bullpen for the Reds has a few guys in it. Emilio Pagan is going to be the closer. Tony Santillan, Tancian, also there. He'll likely be a setup guy. Talk about Brock Burke, who they just acquired. Also got Pierce Johnson in there, Sam Mole, and Caleb Ferguson, both lefties. They got some nice balance in their pen, and they got a really nice, solid pen. But Phillips is the guy that gets the most strikeouts, and for that reason, alongside his control, I don't know if they'd be willing to trade him. All that said, this guy would be a fantastic addition for the Seattle Mariners. In the 25 innings last year, opponents hit just 131 against him, with a 32.7% strikeout rate and a 12.2% walk rate, with a whip under 1. That led him to an under 3 ERA and an under 4 FIP. Like I said, good stuff. High strikeout, but the high walk comes with that. but he's young, and you might be able to get that under control. You see guys start out with high walk percentages, especially after transitioning from starter to reliever. You saw it with Matt Brash, and he began to get that under control more in his career, leading to him to be able to control that and make him better. You saw that breakout in 2020. What was that, 2023, that he was really, really dominant. But Connor Phillips has all control left. That's all 7 years, I believe. Which means he is really valuable and would be really, really hard to trade for. A 3-pitch mix for Phillips. He threw 50% four-seam last year, which averages 98, just over miles an hour, and was a stuff plus of 97, which means it was slightly below average in terms of four-seam fastballs last year. His best pitches is sweeper. He threw that 45% of the time, which had a 139 stuff plus. Absolute filth with that sweeper, and is a major reason why he got the 32.7% strikeout rate that he had last year. He also has a curveball that he doesn't throw a whole lot, but is a 113 stuff plus, and you might see him throw it a little bit more this year. You see guys that are the fastball slider combination quite often and see them be successful. I think of Edwin Diaz as a guy that was really successful with that. I'm not saying Connor Phillips is Edwin Diaz, but he's really, really filthy, and that sweeper is nasty. It is really good. Like I said, it's a right-handed reliever that's controllable and that the Mariners could allow themselves to mold a little bit and even make him possibly better. But even if he produces what he did last year, that's a really damn valuable reliever, especially for a team that already has its closer job locked up and already has its set-up right-handed reliever guy there as well. This is the type of move that signals we want the fuck you bullpen that we've been talking about for a few years now. Gregory Santos was thought to allow them to have a little bit of a fuck you pen. It didn't work out, obviously, but that was the thought, and you can see that the Mariners slightly want that. They're not quite there yet, and Connor Phillips would allow them to have a controllable guy that you can look to the future with. Once Matt Brash, Andres Munoz, Gabe Spire are gone, this is the type of guy you could see come up and be truly dominant. It would be a really fun addition. And he came up with the Mariners, or was with the Mariners for a little bit, which means the Mariners definitely do like him. A guy that's somewhat similar is Matt Svanson. This is a right-handed reliever that's 27 years old and controlled for 6 more years from the St. Louis Cardinals. We haven't seen the Mariners and the Cardinals line up on deals really at all. And they do have a new leadership group led by Chaim Bloom, but we haven't seen them be able to line up on a deal for Brendan Donovan, which makes it difficult to see them align themselves for Matt Svanson. That said, if you can do it, this is another home run type of reliever that you bring in. Like I said, 27 years old and really good. He threw 60 1/3 innings last year in 39 games with an ERA under 2 and a FIP under 3. A 29.1% strikeout rate, which was in the 88th percentile, and a slightly below average walk rate of 8.5%, which is a lot better than Connor Phillips' walk rate, if you want to compare the two. Opponents hit just 157 against him, and he had a whip under 1, under 0.9, a 0.88 whip, and gave up just 3 home runs in those 60 1/3 innings last year. He averages 97 nearly miles an hour on his fastball, and he is a 4-pitch mix guy. It's a sinker, it's a sweeper, it's a cutter, and it's a four-seamer. That sinker allows him to get some ground balls. The question is, can he maintain that strikeout percentage? Because he doesn't get a ton of chase, and he doesn't get a ton of whiff. A 30th percentile whiff rate and a 2nd percentile chase rate. How does he get those strikeouts? Because usually you see at least one of those things up there closer to the strikeout rate for that strikeout rate to be high. That said, that doesn't mean I think he's going to regress on that. because a 30% strikeout rate is no joke. I talked about the 4-pitch mix. If you want to look at percentages, he threw 47% sinker last year, 35% sweeper, 16% cutter, and he threw a 4-seamer 1% of the time total. The best pitch is the sweeper if you look at Stuff Plus, a 125 Stuff Plus. And it was really good results-wise as well. Opponents hit just 127 against it with a 159 slug. And the expected numbers were real good as well. 238 expected slug, 146 expected average. He throws it over 30% of the time against both left and right-handed hitters. So he uses it against everyone. And like I said, it's nasty, a 26.7% whiff rate. Didn't give up a single home run and gave up just 2 doubles, which were the only extra base hits he gave up against it last year. Profile-wise, it runs a little bit similar to the cutter, except the cutter averages 92.2 miles an hour and moves a little bit less than that sweeper. The sweeper's under 90 miles an hour. The sinker produces ground balls, like I said, but it also got a little bit of whiff, almost a 20% whiff rate on that. You give up 2 doubles, 2 home runs with a 103 Stuff Plus and an 11 run value. He threw it 56% of the time against righties and 36% of the time against lefties. Against righties, it's major sinker sweeper combo with 56% sinker, 38% sweeper, which led him to over an 85% purely, actually over 90% on just those 2 pitches. 93% of the time, he threw a sinker or a sweeper. The cutter and the 4-seam combined for 7%, cutter being thrown 6% of the time, and the 4-seam being thrown 1% of the time against righties. Against lefties, 36% sinker, 30% sweeper, 31% cutter, 3% 4-seam. So that cutter is a weapon that he allows himself to use against lefties so that he can combat some split stuff. All that said, results-wise, it was a really good pitch. Opponents hit just 219 against it with a 313 slug. I talked about it right off the rip with this guy. This would be a home run acquisition for me. He struggled a little bit in high leverage situations last year, but he struck out 33.3% of the hitters. That means a third of the batters he faced in high leverage situations he struck out. Walk rate went up a little bit to 11%, which led him to a whip over 1.3 and a FIP over 4.5. That's how splits-wise left versus right, there wasn't a big difference. He was really dominating in both. And even had reverse splits in some senses. Against left-handed hitters, I talked about how he had another weapon to use against lefties. He was a 3-pitch mix more so against lefties. He didn't give up a single home run against left-handed hitters, and the lefties hit 117, 255, 169 against him. That was 94 left-handed hitters. He had a 31% strikeout rate nearly, but the walk rate was closer to 13%. An 0.89 whip and a 2.59 FIP. Against righties, he gave up 3 home runs, which meant the slug was a little bit higher, but still 186, 236, 295, and a walk rate below 6%. Faced 140 right-handed hitters and had a 28% strikeout rate with an 0.87 FIP whip, 0.02%, 0.02 better than against lefties, and his FIP was slightly worse, 2.81, mostly because of those 2 home runs. Matt Svanson, really good reliever. Hard to acquire, though. I think it'd be easier than Connor Phillips would be because Connor Phillips is on a team that wants to compete, whereas the Cardinals are taking a step back, and maybe that allows you to go trade a bunch of prospects for Svanson, but he wouldn't be cheap by any means. He would cost some of your bigger guys. And knowing the Cardinals, they would probably ask for a Ryan Sloan. I don't know if you're Seattle, if you would be willing to give up Ryan Sloan purely for Matt Svanson. That said, could you see him in a package with Donovan where you see some of those real big guys go? Maybe it's, if you don't want to give up any of those big 3, maybe it's Lazaro Montes, Johnny Farmello, and Jurangelo Sanja, maybe even another piece that gets the Cardinals to bite. Because with Svanson, unlike Donovan, they don't gotta trade Svanson by any means. Donovan, you think they want to trade more so. So with Svanson, you got to get them to bite, and that seems to be something that's really difficult to do with the Cardinals, which is why, this is a dream. I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think either of these first two guys would happen. But if they were to, it'd be a home run acquisition for this bullpen, for this offseason for me. And if you can get one of those two guys on another bat, this offseason jumps up to A- at least for me. And I feel really good about this bullpen and this roster heading into the season. These last two guys I would also feel real good about if the Mariners were to acquire them. Let's start with the one that I think would be a little bit slightly harder maybe to acquire and that I don't quite want as much. That's 34-year-old Ryan Thompson from the Arizona Diamondbacks. Single year of control making, going to make nearly $4 million this year, but he's a right-handed reliever with a really unique angle. It's a sidearm angle, nearly submarine-y, but it's a negative arm angle. So it's almost considered, I guess, submarine. Gets a ton of ground balls and is able to limit walks without getting a whole ton of strikeouts. Thompson would be a nice and welcome acquisition that would bring a little bit of a unique look to the Mariners bullpen, which I don't think they have a whole lot of yet. You talk about the sidearm or 3/4 sort of release. Mariners don't have a guy that's super, super, super like that. They have a little bit of the 3/4 type of guys, but they don't have a sidearmer or a submariner by any means. So I think having Ryan Thompson and bringing him in would be a really fun and cool acquisition for this bullpen. He was really good in 2024, and in 2025 dealt with a shoulder injury from July through August and into the beginning of September that limited him this season through just 41 1/3 innings after throwing 66 1/3 in 2024. His numbers were slightly down, partially likely due to that injury, I'd like to say. In 2024, he posted a 3.26 ERA and a 3.30 FIP. Not my favorite number, but WHIP is the one I like. A 1.19 WHIP in 2024 is really good. And in the year before that, it was a WHIP under 1, which I think is great for relievers. Opponents also had their largest batting average on balls in play in 2025, so we got a little bit unlucky. Opponents hit 317 in terms of that batting average on balls in play. It was a 3.92 ERA in 2025 and a 3.74 FIP. And like I said, it was a 3.26 in 24 and a 3.30 FIP in 2024. It's mostly a 2-pitch mix, but it can be a 3-pitch mix as he does have 3 pitches that he will throw. It's a sinker slider 4-seam mix with mostly that sinker and the slider, with the sinker being what gets him all those ground balls. In 2024, he threw 51% sinker, or in 2025, 51% sinker, 41% slider, 8% 4-seamer. 2024 was a 64% sinker, 26% slider, and 10% 4-seamer. And left-handed hitters saw 75% sinker. His arm angle was slightly lower in 2025 than it was in 2024, which might be part of why those results changed a little bit. That said, it was a 35.9% chase rate and a 49.2% ground ball rate, which were both bright red on that Savant page. Didn't have enough innings to qualify, but both were up there and would have been really nice percentages in the 85 probably percentile plus. Opponents against his sinker this last year hit 341 with a 418 slug, which majorly outperformed the expected numbers. Expected average was just 286. Expected slug was 298, which was 20 points lower. 2024 opponents hit 267 with a 401 slug, which is much more reasonable. The slider, though, is the pitch to look at. Opponents hit 125 against it with a 286 slug, a 35% whiff rate. And then that four-seamer, opponents hit 250 and slug 250 against it. He doesn't throw super hard, just about 90 miles an hour, and he lost some velocity on that fastball from 2024 to 2025, losing nearly 2 miles an hour. And in terms of splits, he was better against righties, of course, as you'd expect. But that's just last year. You look at a year prior, he was pretty even in terms of splits. That said, this year, 178 whip against left-handed hitters and a 104 against right-handed hitters, with that FIP under 3 against righties and over 5 against lefties. He also struck out 25% of the hitters, right-handed hitters that he faced, and struck out only 14% of the lefties he saw. It's a unique arm angle that doesn't get a ton of strikeouts, but limits walks and limits damage by getting a ton of ground balls. That in of itself would be a nice, fun profile, especially with the unique arm angle and the Mariners' bullpen and pitching lab sort of ability. It's only 1 year of control, and for a Diamondbacks team that doesn't look like they are going to win the National League West, to say the least, you might be able to pry him away even before the season. You want to talk about what he did in 2024? Like I said, that was a really good season for him. He was in the 93rd percentile in chase rate, 87th percentile in walk percentage, 99th percentile in ground ball percentage, but gave up some hard hit, most of which were ground balls. 8th percentile in hard hit rate, 19th in strikeout rate, and 28th in whiff rate. Thompson would be a good acquisition. Is it a home run like Matt Svanson or Connor Phillips would be? No. But that's because he's a controllable guy that's a tier below, if not multiple tiers below, either one of those first two guys. Finally, we get to the fourth guy. This is a guy from the Pittsburgh Pirates that I talked about last deadline if I wanted to see the Mariners acquire him, and I thought he could be a really cool, fun fit. That guy's Dennis Santana, 29 years old. This will be his age 30 season. He's a right-handed reliever with 1 year control and will make $3.5 million this year. Last year, he threw over 70 innings, 70 and third innings, had a whip under 0.9, gave up just 5 home runs, had 16 saves with an ERA of about 2 and a FIP just slightly above 3. He also had 12 holds, most of which came before David Bednar was traded at the deadline. Slightly below average strikeout percentage, basically average in the 47th percentile, 22.2% strikeout rate, but limits walks in the 79th percentile and gets really nice chase in the 96th percentile with a 34.6% chase rate. Throws 5 pitches, but it's mostly a slider and a 4-seam mix, with it being more of a 4-pitch mix against right-handed hitters. Sliders thrown 46% of the time total, 4-seamers thrown 29% of the time, cutter 10, sinker 8, and changeup 6% of the time against lefties. It's 42% slider, 37% 4-seam, 14% changeup, and 5% cutter, with the sinker mixing in rarely at 1% of the time. Against right-handed hitters, it's 49, nearly 50% slider, 22% 4-seam, cutters thrown about 15% of the time, the sinker thrown under that at 13% of the time, and the changeup is very rarely mixed in, similar to the sinker, how the sinker is against lefties. The slider is thrown the most and is his best pitch. 106 stuff plus for that. Opponents hit just 159 with a 286 slug against it and a 35.7% whiff rate. That is a weapon, especially against right-handed hitters. The 4-seamer is thrown the next most and averages 94.7 miles an hour. Opponents hit just 151 and slugged 279 against it. Cutter, opponents hit nearly 300 against it and slugged under 400 against it. That averages about 90 miles an hour, while the sinker averages about 94, nearly 95, similar to the 4-seamer. Slider and the cutter, I talked about it earlier. They have similar profiles, but there's a difference in terms of velocity. Cutter's thrown 3 miles an hour more, and the slider has a little tiny bit more movement, but they will overlap a little bit. Santana limits hard hit in the 73rd percentile while getting pretty much average strikeout percentage and limits walks. 2024, his whip was just barely over 1 and his FIP was basically 3. 2025, whip under 1. FIP slightly higher than the year before at 3.21. Doesn't get a ton of ground balls, but with that average strikeout rate and limiting hard hit, doesn't matter a whole lot. He's able to get fly ball outs, and that plays in T-Mobile Park. Thing you have to remember about relievers is that more often than not, they're even better in Seattle because of the ballpark and because of the pitching lab. 32nd percentile on ground ball rate if you wanted the exact number. He had a little bit of reverse splits as well, being better against lefties for the most part than righties. Lefties hit 143, 223, 204 against him, just 4 extra base hits with 112 hitters, a whip under 1 at 0.85, a FIP of 3.14, strike percentage about 20%. The walk rate, though, was higher, nearly 10%. Right-handed hitters, 203, 247, 358, 158 hitters he faced there. Whip was about the same, FIP basically the same, slightly higher. Struck out a higher percentage, about 23.5%, and walked just under 4% of the hitters that he faced against righties. The last thing on him is in high leverage situations, he was really, really good, even better, in fact. A FIP under 3, 2.62, and a whip under 1 at 0.79 in high leverage situations. Santana, 1-year control Pirates team that kind of seems to want to contend, but I think you could pry him away. I think you could. Because if I'm the Pirates, I'd be willing to trade a bullpen arm if I get something in return that I'm willing and could add to my major league roster. And the Mariners have things, especially outfielders, that the Pirates might be interested in. Quickly, before we log off here, I do want to go look at the Pirates outfield situation, just because I don't know exactly what it looks like. In terms of their outfield situation, Jake Magnum is in left, O'Neill Cruz in center, Brian Reynolds in right. Magnum would probably be the guy that you could very likely get out of there. They have Jaconzi Noel, Jack Zawinski on the bench. Nick York also can play some outfield. None of those guys all that intriguing. So you're telling me you send them a Luke Raley or a Victor Robles plus, a prospect type of guy? I think you could get Dennis Santana. And I think that'd be another really good acquisition for this Mariners team that would slot in as your third best right-handed reliever. Would be a bridge guy for you and could fill in case of injury, case of regression, all of that jazz. Any one of these 4 guys would be a really great acquisition. I think Ryan Thompson would be the least exciting. Dennis Santana would be probably next after that, with Connor Phillips and Svanson being home run acquisitions. Those two feel the least likely. Santana, to me, feels the most likely. Thompson feels like it is a possibility should the Mariners want to go talk to one of their favorite trade partners, and they is Arizona Diamondbacks. There's some guys with the Tampa Bay Rays that might be interesting as well, but it's hard to know exactly what they want to do, and all those guys are fairly controllable, which makes it for a team that seems to want to try and contend, if not this year, in the future, especially with some of those younger guys they have. You talk about Connor Williams coming up soon, but also, or Carson. Is it Carson? I think it's Carson Williams. Carson Williams coming up soon. They'll have a fun left side of the infield in the future. So I think for them, it might be less likely that they're willing to trade a reliever. But the Mariners and the Rays match up on trades all the time. So if you see the Mariners go get a reliever from the Rays, don't be shocked. There's Edwin Uceda there. Griffin Jacks is there. A few other guys even are there. And there is a little bit, I think, of wiggle room that you might be able to get a guy, especially if you give them something fun and solid in return. Hopefully we get a Mariners move soon. Obviously, great weekend for Seattle sports. Really dominant game for the Seahawks against the Niners. What a performance. It's been a great year for Seattle sports. Seeing the Seahawks and the Mariners both do what they've been doing has been a lot of fun. But till Thursday, Jeff will be on Thursday. Till then, as always, go M's and peace.